insane! The invention of the submarine. Imagine diving under the sea and exploring the wonders of the deep without getting wet. It sounds like science fiction. The idea of a submarine has been around for centuries, and its history is full of fascinating stories and inventions. Have you ever wondered how the submarine was invented? How did people come up with the idea of a machine that can dive underwater and do amazing things? In this video, we will take you on a journey through the history of the submarine, from the ancient world to today. Submarines are powerful and stealthy naval weapons that can do many things. They are not new inventions. They have a long history that goes back to ancient times, but who invented them? Let's find out. Have you ever wondered how old the idea of the submarine is? You might think it's a modern invention, but actually, people have been dreaming of exploring the underwater world for a long time. Even ancient civilizations had some ideas of how to do that, but they didn't have the technology to make it happen. The first person who ever thought of a submarine was someone you probably know very well. His name was Leonardo da Vinci, and he was a brilliant artist and scientist. He came up with all kinds of amazing machines that were way ahead of his time, like tanks, parachutes, helicopters, and yes, submarines. But he only drew them on paper. He never actually built them. But it doesn't mean he invented the submarine. It's one thing to have an idea, but it's another thing to make it work. Did you know that Alexander the Great was fascinated by fish? According to a legend, he once went underwater in a huge glass barrel to observe them. This happened around 332 BC, when he was conquering the Persian Empire. Some people might say that this was the first submarine ever, but it was actually more like a diving bell. A diving bell is a container that traps air inside and allows people to breathe underwater. The submarine is a vessel that can move and control its depth. The legend of Alexander's diving bell comes from the Persian epic poem that was written centuries later. It's inspired many medieval artists to depict the scene in paintings and sculptures. We don't know for sure if this legend is true or not, but it shows that humans have always been curious about the underwater world and wanted to explore it with special devices. Imagine if you could make a boat that could sink and float on command. That's what William Bourne, an English mathematician and naval expert, thought of in 1578. He wrote about his idea in a book called Inventions and Devices, where he explained how to make a submarine. Bourne's submarine was made of wood and leather. It had a clever mechanism that could change its size. By turning some handles, the sides of the boat could be squeezed together, making it smaller and heavier. This would make it sink into the water. By turning the handles the other way, the sides of the boat could be stretched out, making it bigger and lighter. This would make it float back to the surface. Bourne never actually built his submarine, but he had a good understanding of how it could work. He was one of the first people to propose a practical way to travel underwater. Can you believe that the first submarine was made in 1620? That's way before the USA was even born, and way before most people think submarines existed. The guy who made it was Cornelius van Drebbel, a Dutch inventor and engineer. He was pretty clever, but his submarine was very different from the ones we have today. He basically took a wooden boat and covered it with some sailcloth that he waxed to make it waterproof. He also made some holes in the oars and covered them with leather. Then he added some pipes to let the air in, like a snorkel, and he put some big bags on the side that he could fill with water to make the boat sink. When he wanted to come up again, he just emptied the bags. That's how he made the first submarine. And he tested it several times on the River Thames between 1620 and 1624. But that submarine didn't do much, really. It was just a cool experiment. When most people think of submarines, they think of war machines. That's what submarines were mostly used for until scientists started using them for research. And most people imagine war submarines. Marin Mersenne, a French priest and science enthusiast, had a groundbreaking idea for a submarine in the 1630s. He proposed constructing the submarine with metal, specifically copper, and designing it to resemble a fish. Mersenne believed that this design would provide the necessary strength to withstand deep water pressure while enabling faster and smoother movement through the water. His insights proved correct on both accounts. It inspired many other people who wanted to make submarines. They followed his example and made their submarines out of metal, and gave them a fish-like shape. Some people wanted to use submarines for war. In the 1650s, a man named Louis de Dawn built a special boat for this purpose. He called it the Rotterdam boat. This boat was like a giant underwater spear designed to stab an enemy ship from below and sink it. But the boat had a big problem. It could not move by itself. It had to be pushed by another boat or by a current. This made it very hard to aim and control. The boat was not very successful in battle, and it was soon abandoned. Did you know that the first real submarine was made by the French? Before that, people had some ideas about how to make underwater vessels, but they didn't really work. In 1863, the French Navy built a submarine called Le Plongeur, which means the diver. It was special because it used compressed air engines to move, instead of people rowing or pedaling. You might be surprised to learn that the Americans were also pioneers in submarine technology. They made some big improvements in how submarines could dive and surface, especially during their wars of independence and Civil War. For example, in 1775, during the war against the British, a man named David Bushnell built a submarine called Turtle. It was a tiny vessel that could fit only one person, who had to pedal a propeller to move. It was also the first submarine to use water as ballast, meaning it could pump water in or out of its hull to change its depth. It was even used to attack enemy ships, making it the first combat submarine. The Turtle tried to make history by blowing up a British ship called HMS Eagle in New York Harbor in 1776, but it didn't work. The pilot, Ezra Lee, couldn't attach the bomb to the ship's hull. But later, during the Civil War, another submarine did manage to sink an enemy ship, and it was built by the Confederates who were fighting against the Union. The Union had blocked the southern ports, so the Confederates needed a way to break through. They made a submarine that had oars to move and a big explosive on a stick in the front. They used it to ram and blow up the Union ship, called the USS Housatonic. But the explosion was so big that it also sank the submarine. Did you know that the first true modern submarine was developed by an Irish-American inventor named John Philip Holland? He is often called the father of the modern submarine because his design was the first one to be accepted by the US Navy. But he didn't start out as a friend of the British. When he was young, he wanted to free Ireland from British rule, so he built a small submarine called the Fenian Ram that could attack and sink British ships. However, he had a falling out with his Irish supporters, and he decided to sell his submarine to other countries. He improved his design and created the Holland series, which was very successful and popular. He even sold some to the British Royal Navy, which must have been awkward. His submarines changed the way wars were fought at sea. They were stealthy, powerful, and innovative. We hope you enjoyed this dive into the history of submarines. The invention of the submarine was a crazy and fascinating journey. From ancient legends to modern marvels, submarines have changed the course of history and exploration. What do you think of submarines? Do you have any favorite ones? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like and share this video with your friends.